911, what are you reporting?
I got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
My dog went flying through the air over the tree. I don't know how it did it.
Okay.
Damn it, I'm really confused. All I saw was my dog coming over the fence, and he was dead when she hit the ground. I didn't see any cars. All I saw was my dog coming over the fence.
What are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was?
It was standing up. I'm out here looking through the window now and I don't see anything. I don't want to go outside. Jesus Christ, you better...
Sure.
Dia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Sasquatch Odyssey. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us for the show. It is Friday. I hope you guys have had an amazing week. We've got a great guest lined up for you, but as always, I want to start the show by inviting you. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. You can get me at brian@sasquatchodyssey.net. Remember to go over and check out SasquatchOdyssey.net. There is a button at the bottom of the website if you want to leave your encounter stories, or if you just want to stop in and say hello or leave some feedback on the show. You go over to the website. It's on the homepage there. You just click the button at the bottom, hit record. You can record up to 5 minutes at a time, and that comes directly to me via email. Something else I want to talk to you guys about before we get into the show tonight. I've had to change the way that I have done the memberships for the show several times now. For those of you guys that have been members, you've been involved in those changes, and you guys have been absolutely amazing. I can't thank you enough for showing up each week. You guys have really made it possible for me to continue to do the show. I've talked about this. I'm not going to mention all the things that go into making the show and all the expenses and those things. I've talked about that before. The memberships were designed to help offset that cost. And some of you guys have been members since almost day one, and I can't thank you guys enough. Mike, John, Julie, Doug, David. I can't name everybody, but you guys know who you are. You've supported this show in a huge way from day one, and I can't thank you enough. I am changing the way that we do the memberships. I've gotten some negative feedback in the past about stealing all of Wes's content from Sasquatch Chronicles and trying to get rich off of it by creating members-only paid content. Well, I'm sure you guys are still listening because all the negative commenters always listen to the show every week because I get negative comments from you every week. So that's not the case. I don't get rich off of this show. The memberships are there to offset the cost and the time and the energy and the effort that goes into producing this show every week. I also do the Paranormal Odyssey show. It's a whole nother show. It's a whole nother set of interviews. It's a whole nother set of production, editing. I do all that myself. And I work 50 hours a week, just like everybody else. There's no getting rich off of this show, believe me. The memberships are there to help support the creative content that you guys come and listen to for free every single week. Patreon is a website. It's a platform for content creators like myself to create a page for people who enjoy that content to go and choose how to support the shows. That's all it is. It's almost like public television, right? It's like PBS. You see those specials where they beg you for money, right? But I'm going to put the Patreon link in the show notes for the show. If you're already a member, you should have gotten an email from me already about me canceling your current memberships, and I'm going to send you guys the link in the email. You should have already received that for you to choose. If you want to continue to support the show, at what tier you'd like to do that. We're going to do merchandise and other things to make it enjoyable for you guys and for you to get something for what you're putting back into the show, right? That's really what it's all about. It's a give and take in these kind of situations. So I don't want to talk about that all the time. I don't like talking about money all the time. It takes away from the show time, but I felt it necessary to sort of address that and put it out there for you guys. The other way that you can support the show that's 100% free is just show up and listen to the show every week and then share it with your friends. If there's somebody that is into this kind of thing or you think might enjoy this, tell them about the show. Sometimes you have to tell them what a podcast is. Hard to believe that somebody in 2021 doesn't know what a podcast is, but there are plenty of people out there who don't. If you have friends who don't know what a podcast is, tell them you enjoy the show and tell them to check it out. The other free way is something I say almost every week. I forget to say it as much as I should. It's probably one of the more important ways that you can help the show. Whatever podcast player you listen on every week, take 10 seconds, hit the rate button, give us a 5-star rating, and take the time to actually do a review. Just click the review. It asks you to input a username or a name or whatever. You can put whatever you want. I don't care. Leave some constructive feedback if you want, or just put great show or thanks or whatever the case may be, particularly on Apple Podcasts. That's the huge podcast catcher for any show, basically. Any rating is a good rating because it drives you up in the algorithms and it makes it easier for other people to find the show. So if you guys would do that, I would greatly appreciate it. If you feel so inclined to support the show financially and help us keep coming back and help keep those proverbial lights on, check out the link in today's show notes. It'll be a Patreon link. You can go over, you can check out the tiers, and then you can decide if you want to support the show and if so, how. But enough of that. We've got a great guest. We've got somebody from my home state. I'm in North Carolina now, but my home state where I was born and raised is Georgia, and we've got Chuck on the line. He's got some great stories. We had a great conversation. I got on a soapbox a little bit, so forgive me for that. But Chuck is on the line. We're going to get into his encounter stories and talk about everything Bigfoot, right? For those of you guys who are enjoying my other show, The Paranormal Odyssey, I've got a great interview coming up. It's with Kathleen Marden. She's the niece of Betty and Barney Hill from one of the most famous abduction stories, UFO abduction stories from back in 1961. It's a great interview with Kathleen. We talked about some great things. If you're into the UFOs and the paranormal, go over to the Paranormal Odyssey podcast. Any of your podcast players, you'll find it there. I'll also probably end up putting a link on this show notes once I air that show on Sunday. It'll probably show up over here as a bonus show for you guys. So if you're interested in that, check back on Sunday and check out that show. As I said, enough of me talking. I'm going to let the music play. Chuck's on the line. He's ready to go. You guys sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest. It is Chuck. He comes to us from Georgia. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. I'm glad you joined us tonight. And I know you've got some encounter stories you're going to tell us about. So why don't you just take us back to the first encounter that you had? Tell us where you were, what you were doing, and what happened out there, man.
All right. We had moved to a little place. I'm originally from Hartwell. Well, I'm originally from Cleveland, Georgia, but I live in Hartwell, Georgia. Have all of my life except for whenever I was in the Army. I was in the Army for, I was on active duty for 13 years. Before that, I was in the National Guard for about 5.5 years. But we had moved to a little place out by Hart State Park, and it's by no means in the middle of nowhere. It's a mile and a half outside of Hartwell. Lots of traffic here and there. We had a little, I guess, grape arbor next to our house where we lived, and it had muscadine vines growing on it. And my sister and I were out there, and I saw something. It was short. It was probably 2.5 foot tall. I saw it. My sister saw it at the same time. She screamed. I about crapped my pants, and we run in the house. And neither one of us mentioned it until we were on vacation. I was probably 38, 39. That would have put her at 32, 33. We sat up all night one night talking. And I asked her, I said, Julie, do you remember when we were down there on Ridge Road? And she said, yeah, that thing we saw. And I said, yeah. But Brian, it was, like I said, it was about 2.5 feet tall. It looked like, I don't know, it had exceptionally long arms, skinny legs, skinny arms, evil looking face. I'm a Christian person, and to me, whatever that was had to be demonic. I mean, there was nothing natural looking about it. It was just, I mean, horrible looking. Scarred her and I both. I mean, it made an impression on us. You know, like I said, we didn't talk about it for 25 years. You know, it was just something that she saw, something that I saw, and, you know, but anyway, that's what happened during that story.
Before we go any further, to sort of paint the picture for the audience, and I know you said it was 2.5 feet tall, it had long arms. Did this thing look like a humanoid? Did it look like a gray alien? Can you sort of go into some detail and tell us what it is that you guys saw?
It was human body plan. I mean, you know, the body plan of human ape, you know, well, body plan of ape. I consider us apes as well because technically we are. But yeah, it had that body plan. It had, I can't remember. I remember some type of clothing on this thing. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember that it was not naked. It was actually clothed, but it had, I would say, darker skin, not on the color scale of human skin, more along a gray looking skin. And that was what put me more than anything to lean toward demonic, you know, because it was not, there were just characteristics about it that were not natural.
It definitely sounds very interesting, man. I've talked to people. I have a friend down in Alabama, Jonathan Odom, who does the Alabama Paranormal and Bigfoot, and Jonathan has seen little people in the woods. I've actually had him on the show. He talked about it when he was on the show. He's seen literally little 1.5 to 2 foot tall green men in the woods. And one of them he even described as almost looking very Native American-like in the face and the features. It's just fascinating, man. It's really intriguing to me. So let's go on to something a little more normal, and let's talk about your Bigfoot encounters that you've had. So why don't you just sort of take us back to where you were, what you were doing, and what happened during that encounter?
Okay. I was dating a girl. This would have been 88, 89. I was, shortly out of high school. Graduated in 87. She and I went up. It's actually up above Helen, up above Robertstown, going up toward the head of the Chattahoochee River. And we went camping one night. And I was laying there awake. I always have trouble sleeping whenever I go camping. I love to go camping, but I guess it goes back to my military time where I'm hyper aware, whenever I'm in a strange place. And I had been in the National Guard for a year, 2 years, 3 years, somewhere around in there whenever we were camping. So again, I had some military training at that point. But I'm laying there and I heard something walking. And I don't know if you're familiar with granite dust. A lot of times they will put that on campsites. And it packs hard as a rock. And that was on the campsite where we were. And there were hemlock trees all around us. So not like there was leaves on the ground. Hemlocks don't shed hardly anything. So it was bare ground. And I could hear something walking. And I couldn't tell, how heavy it was because, like I said, it was walking on hard ground. It wasn't being sneaky. But then I heard a noise. And Brian, I've been to 43 countries in my life. I know language when I hear language, whether it's a language that I know or whether it's a language that I don't know. I know it's language when I hear language. This thing was speaking, but it wasn't speaking in a tone that I had ever heard or have heard since. And it wasn't speaking a language that I have ever heard or heard since. I was listening to Ron Moorhead's Sierra Sounds, his and Al Berry's Sierra sounds, and I heard something on there that was extremely close. And I will do my best to give the audience an example of what this thing sounded like. It was kind of like something along those lines. But anyway, I know language when I hear it, and that was definitely language. And I could also hear something else a little further away, a little further down toward the river walking. But I never heard any language or, any response back from it. Well, needless to say, I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I had an old 78 International Scout, and the next morning I got up and went up to the Scout to get the camp stove to bring down to cook breakfast. When I got up there, Brian, there was a handprint. I can't remember if it was frost or dew, heavy dew, but there was a handprint on the driver's window of my Scout. I've got huge hands, and this thing made my hands look tiny. I mean, I've seen a life-size scale of Shaquille O'Neal, and this thing would have made his hands look like a baby holding up next to mine. I mean, its fingers were literally 5 inches. If I put the heel of my hand on the heel of where that thing's palm was, the fingers are 5 inches longer than where my fingers would have extended to. And I did not visually see this thing, but I heard it, and I saw visual evidence of it the next morning.
Do you remember when you were looking at the print? And I asked this question specifically because I've talked to Doug Hychek from Monster Quest, and one of the things that he's doing now, he's trying to do this Legend Meets Science Round 2 project, and he is very interested in the fingerprint, even sometimes footprints and other types of things that have the sebum that these things leave behind. It's this white sort of sticky type of residue that people are finding on these fingerprints and handprints that they're finding on vehicles and things like that.
No, there was nothing like that. It was just, if you walked up to a heavy dude or a frosted window and placed your hand on it and like you were going to look in, pulled it away, that was what it looked like.
Yeah, I guess that would make sense. If there's moisture in the air, it's going to be a little more difficult to leave that sort of residue behind.
And it would, yeah. I have my mind works very scientifically, and I guess I would describe myself as a skeptic who believes that these things exist. To me, there's a difference between I believe they exist and I know they exist. And I think that the science is what I lean towards with these things. If there's so much anecdotal evidence out there, if I think I might have heard you, or it might have been Wes the other day, I was listening to a podcast, and if we had to put Bigfoot on trial of does he exist or not, to me, the jury would have to rule that he does.
Yeah, I've said that on a couple of shows. I've said, if we were putting Bigfoot on trial, he would be found guilty by a jury of his peers, right? Because there's so much,
Absolutely.
as you said, so much anecdotal evidence. And that's one of the things that I enjoy the most about doing the show, and I say it often. I believe that these encounter stories, and even the ones like yours where you don't actually have a visual sighting of one of these things, are important because it goes to the behavior. It sets a pattern and shows a pattern of behavior over and over and over and over again in these encounter stories with the vocalizations. Sometimes you hear the vocalizations and the bluff charging and all the things that go along with these encounters are important because you're experiencing that in Georgia, and I talk to people in British Columbia that have experienced the same thing, in Canada, or in the Pacific Northwest, or even in North Carolina, South Carolina, Louisiana, Florida, Georgia. It's everywhere. And I too, like you, I'll be honest, it's today's August the 22nd. I don't know when this is going to air, but for the last week to week and a half, I have struggled so much with some of the evidence that I've been presented with, and even gotten some evidence recently that I've actually sent over to Doug Hychek and figured out that it was faked. And it just pisses me off so bad because there's so much real evidence out there that goes to proving that these things exist, because I do believe that they do. But I struggle sometimes, and I always say I'll leave that open, and my mind is always open for being swayed one way or the other, whether they exist or not. But I believe today that they do. Even though people fake evidence and send it to me and expect that I'm not going to figure that out, I don't understand that.
My thing, Brian, is that there's so much good evidence out there. You know, I mean, how many more blob squatches are we going to have to see? You know, how many more footprints are we going to have to see? You know, to me, none of that anymore. I mean, I hate to put it this way, but to me, none of that anymore matters, because it's going to take a type specimen or hard DNA evidence to prove these things. And I don't know that hard DNA evidence is going to do it.
Yeah, I don't think the DNA is either. I talked to Jeff Meldrum about that. I have a listener who says every time I talk about having Jeff Meldrum on the show that I'm bragging. So whoever listens and leaves me those comments, I just mentioned Jeff Meldrum again. But when I talked to Dr. Meldrum and had him on the show, we talked about that. Like, I asked the question, is DNA going to be enough? No, it's not enough, because there's nothing to compare it to. I've talked to Doug about this, Doug Hychek. We've talked about DNA, and it's not going to prove it until somebody shoots one of these things and drags it in. Probably it's going to take two, because some people are saying they're never going to believe that there's just one, or they'll say that's the only one, right? So you're going to have to drag two in for them to study, for people to go, aha, right?
I'm thinking more along the lines of a log truck hitting one up in the Pacific Northwest, and that way nobody will have to feel guilty about shooting one.
And that's a very good point, because I talk to people all the time who say, I would feel guilty. I would feel guilty killing one of these things. I'll be honest with you. You know, I say it on the show, and people get pissed off, and they leave reviews and saying, I can't believe, they email me telling me I'm pro-kill. No, I'm not pro-kill. I'm pro-science. I want this to be proven. I believe these things exist, and we have to be honest with each other. Like you said, blob squatches aren't going to get it done, people. I joined some groups recently on Facebook, and here I go. I'm going to get emails about talking about Facebook groups. But I've talked to about it before. I have joined Facebook groups, and I'm in one now. I'm not going to say the name of the group, but it's entertaining, and I stay in the group because it's entertaining. Because these people spend so much time. I literally spent probably 10, 15 minutes yesterday taking screenshots of photos that people post in this group, and it's literally nothing.
If this gets me kicked out of it, I don't care. But I'm in the Georgia Bigfoot group, and every day the same guy posts pictures that he's taking. To me, it's not. There's absolutely nothing. If you have to draw it out for me, then that picture's worthless.
It's the famous red circle. I call it the red circle squatch, because if you have to draw a circle around it, it's probably not there. Yep. So Earth, to all the people in this group that I'm talking about, that I wish I'm not going to say the name of it. Like I said, I do find it entertaining, but that has caused me to really question things over the last couple of weeks, because, and I hate to be on the soapbox and people are going to get upset because I'm on a tangent, but I can't help it. I'm sorry. These people post these pictures in this group, and the group is literally, you could probably figure it out by this. If you say that it's not real, you get booted out of the group.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Well, that's one thing that I do appreciate about that Georgia Bigfoot group is they don't mind people being skeptical. At least the admins of the group don't. And they don't mind it when you call somebody out on a blob squatch.
Well, that's the way it should be. That's the correct way to go about this discourse. It's the correct way to approach this subject. If you can't disagree with somebody or challenge them on the evidence that they're presenting, then what are we doing? It's one of the things that if you listen to the show a couple of weeks ago with Stephen Strufert, Stephen runs the Coalition for Critical Thinking and Bigfoot Research Group. And I've had tons of arguments with guys in there, but they keep you honest. And most of those guys in there listen to this show. And it's a Bigfoot encounter show. And they don't believe necessarily that these things exist, right? But they give it enough respect to say, hey, I like the way you do your show. I think you're fair about it. I think you go about it in a critical thinking sort of way. And if you call a guest out for hoaxing or you call somebody out for posting blob squatches, then great. But if you don't, I'm not completely convinced that everything that's ever presented is a Bigfoot. I just don't believe that.
Exactly.
And I think we have to continue to have some real, honest adult conversations about this subject to ever move it forward. And people have to stop faking evidence. I'll just throw that out there too.
I think right now, Brian, that the one person, and this is just my opinion, uneducated North Georgia boy who's, just got a little bit of common sense. I think that the one person right now who is doing as much or more to forward this thing in a correct way is Les Stroud. And I appreciate the fact that, his first shows he spent with Todd Standing. And Todd Standing is either the greatest hoaxer in the world or he's got some absolute amazing proof that Bigfoot exists. One of the two.
Well, I've went on record and called Todd Standing a hoaxer because my personal belief is that 98% of the things that he's put out are probably hoaxes. And I've went on the record and said, I do believe that Todd Standing has seen Bigfoot. I think he's had real legitimate encounters with these things, but it happens here. It's happened to me recently, and I want to say so bad who it is, but I'm not going to go there. But there's somebody I know that has had legitimate experiences, but is now hoaxing evidence because it's not enough.
Yeah, and to me, that's absolutely. I mean, there's nothing good that can come from doing that, because all you're doing once you're found out as a hoaxer is giving everyone else who tries to go about this in a skeptical, scientific manner, you're making us look stupid.
Absolutely, and I'm having Les Stroud on the show. He's probably going to be on in the next couple of months. He's starting to do interviews again. He's been on sort of hiatus from interviews because they've been filming and doing some other projects. But Les is going to come on the show, and I can't wait to ask him that question. I hope it doesn't piss him off, but I've got to ask the question about Todd Standing because I've said it before. He dragged Jeff Meldrum and Dr. John Bindernagel up to that site and dragged them very close and into, in my opinion, his hoaxing on that Discovering Bigfoot or whatever, documentary he spent $900,000 of his and everybody else's money producing. It was a great documentary. And I left that the first time I watched it thinking, holy shit, this is amazing. This guy has proven, and beyond a shadow of a doubt, because that's HD quality close-up pictures in the daytime of a Sasquatch. And then I started looking at it, and then I was like, that one particular one looks a little off to me.
The darker one, the eye blinks look very mechanical to me.
Yeah, and I think it was Thinker Thunker, or I don't know who exactly did it, but did an actual side-by-side breakdown of Todd Standing himself and that animal or creature or whatever's portrayed in the video. It's almost an identical match. It's like him in a suit, or some people have said it's his father. I don't know. I've invited Todd Standing on the show numerous times, and he's always declined. So, Todd, if you're listening, you can still come on the show and prove me wrong. But
I think that, I can't say, because I have not done the research that you've done, that he's a hoaxer. That's why I say he's either a hoaxer or he's got the most convincing evidence ever.
Yeah, well, I'm lazy most of the time. I don't do a ton. I don't do a ton of research myself. I just talk to people that I trust, that I know has put hours and hours and hours. And Steve Coles is one of those people, the Squatch detective. Steve has been on the show a couple of times, and I know how in depth Steve has went on the Todd Standing issue, and Steve is 100% convinced that he is a hoaxer. And that's frankly good enough for me. You know, if it may offend people and it may upset people. I know, because there's plenty of people that are in his camp, and I wanted to be so badly.
Yeah.
I've almost reconsidered, of late, because of his relationship with Les Stroud. I think Les is probably one of the most intelligent people that has ever even blinked at this subject. And it fascinates me that he is involved in doing those shows with Todd Standing, because I don't believe he would do that if he knew that Todd was hoaxing. So either, like you said, if he's able to convince people like Jeff Meldrum, John Bindernagel, and now Les Stroud that what he's experiencing or what's really happening is real, then I don't know what to say. I really don't.
Well, at the same time, I don't think that I ever heard Les say, here, this guy has convincing proof. I think Les was still very skeptical.
Yeah, and I think the same thing, if you pay very close attention in Todd Standing's documentary with Jeff Meldrum and John Bindernagel, Jeff Meldrum and Dr. Bindernagel were very careful with the verbiage and the wording of what they said. And if you pay attention to the language and you pay attention to what they're saying, they never said anything that would convince you or I that they were convinced that what was happening there was 100% legitimate. Jeff Meldrum, I think, had a sighting, or he did have a sighting there. We talked about that. I don't know if it got on the air with the show, but he and I talked about that either off air or I don't remember. It was so long ago. But he actually had an experience there. And I think John Bindernagel did as well. It was an audible sort of thing. He didn't see anything, but they had some sort of experience. And I, again...
Yeah, while they were with Todd, yes.
Yes, and I believe, as I said, and I'll continue to say it, I give him the credit where credit's due. I believe that Todd Standing has probably had experiences with Bigfoot, but very similar to some of the situations I've been in recently with people closer to home. You have those experiences, and you have those experiences multiple times, and then maybe it stops, or maybe you only have one, and then you feel like you have to start faking pictures and video and audio and sending it to people like me to try to convince me to put it on my show as real evidence. Well, newsflash, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. I see exactly where you're coming from on that, and I totally agree with you. It's like, the experience that I've talked about, that's it. I don't have anything else. I live out in the woods in Georgia. I'm outside a lot. I do a lot of hunting. I do a lot of fishing. But what I've stated here tonight, as far as my experiences, that's it. I've got nothing else.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with me. I've said it on the show before. I had an experience when I was 12 years old. I don't know what that was. I know what I think it was, but I can't definitively say it was a Bigfoot. We've had experiences here on our property in North Carolina. We have heard things that have scared the shit out of me. 50 yards from my house. I don't know what else it could be other than a Sasquatch. But I can't definitively say that, and I'll always question myself, and I leave it open for maybe it was a big cat. Maybe it was something I misidentified. But I can't definitively say that because I haven't seen one.
And Brian, from time to time, I hear stories on your show, on Wes's show, and I think to myself, there is absolutely no way that occurred. And then I stop myself and I think, now, who are you to tell that person what they experienced?
And that's the perfect way to look at it, Chuck. I think that's the way that I do the show. It's pretty much the way Wes does his show. We're not here to judge somebody's experience. And I had a hard time with that in the beginning. I had some people on the show. Oh, God, if you listen to some of those earlier shows, 1 through 5, 6, 7, where the audio quality was horrible and I was recording them on my cell phone, thank God you guys have stuck around and continue to listen to the show. I appreciate that. But you go back to some of those shows and some of those people told some pretty fantastical stories. Dave always comes to mind when, he's talking about being within arm's length of these things, feeding them, and how he knows they hunt with coyotes. I think that was the name of his episode, Sasquatch hunts with coyotes or whatever. He told some crazy stories. But you know what's funny? I've actually talked to people and recently that I've had on the show and some that haven't aired yet that have told me very similar things about having experiences with Bigfoot and coyotes. And these people are very credible. And it makes
Yeah.
me wonder, and I go back and I say, well, that's why I didn't question his story. I put that intro in there and said, hey, this is kind of out there. I hope you guys stick with it. I don't know what's true here. It's up to you guys to decide what's true, but just listen to the story. And tons of people, that's one of the most popular episodes of the show ever. People love his stories.
That's one thing that I love about what Steve Isdall's doing. He is just sharing people's stories. That's all he's doing. And he's leaving it up to other people. Believe what you want to believe.
Yeah, and that's what you have to do at the end of the day. There's some fantastic things that have happened to people. I'm doing the Paranormal Odyssey show now, the other podcast that I started, to do the more out there dogman encounters and UFO encounters. And
Yeah.
I'm going to go over and post one of those shows on Sasquatch Odyssey tonight, because I just had an hour-and-a-half conversation with Paul Eno. He's a paranormal investigator. He used to work with Ed and Lorraine Warren from the Conjuring movies, if you guys are horror film watchers. But he used to work with those guys in the early 70s, and he told me some things that curled my toes that have happened to him, personal experiences. And he is probably one of the most credible people I have ever talked to. But he's had experiences that, when he says that he walked into this house that was having this poltergeist activity, that in near the Bridgewater Triangle where he and Ed and Lorraine Warren were investigating, and a chair gets thrown at his head. That's some crazy stuff, man. But it's his experiences, and I believe that it happened to him. So people experience a lot of things that may or may not make sense to some of us, or you hear the stories and you say, well, that's got to be made up. Well, hold up a second. I don't know about that. Because
Exactly.
some very credible people have had some amazing experiences that I believe are 100% true. So,
Well, being a Christian, Brian, I believe that evil is just as present as good is. There's as much. I'm just stating the way I believe. There's as much evil in the world as there is good. In my opinion, in the end, good wins out. However, right now, the evil is present. And to me, that's what a lot of these things that people are experiencing, in my opinion, that's what it is. But again, that's my opinion, and nobody else has to believe that the way I believe it.
very well said, man. And that's kind of the mantra and the motto of this show. You take what you want, you leave the rest, and it's up to you to decide what you believe about these stories. All right, so I'm going to get off the soapbox and stop talking about all that stuff. I know you've got other experiences that folks in your family have had, Chuck. Why don't you sort of take us back and tell us what happened to them?
Well, my dad's the type of person that you when he's joking, and he jokes a lot, but you also know when he's serious and he's telling you something that you need to believe. And back when he was young, 18, 19 years old, he was up between Cleveland and Dahlonega, and he was parked out by a lake. And from his tale, he was waiting on a girl to come out there. And he saw something walking around the edge of the lake. My dad's been a carpenter his whole life. He's a general contractor. When he tells you something's 7.5 to 8 feet tall, you can believe that that's how tall it is. He said that this thing was walking along the edge. He said the arms were, longer than they should have been. It was a full moonlit night. He could see it very well. And even, talked about as it was coming towards him, he could see that, it was just massive, built like Schwarzenegger on steroids, not that Schwarzenegger wasn't on steroids, but anyway, just that this thing was just massive and muscular. And he said he left. He don't know whether the girl ever came by or not, but he didn't hang around to wait and see. And he said he got out of there in a pretty quick hurry. He said he watched it for about 15 seconds, and it kept getting closer, and he got out of there. And that was the end of his. And he's had no more experiences other than that. And my uncle, when he was 10, 12 years old, again, this all happened in Cleveland, the Cleveland area, White County. He saw one coming out of an old chicken house, and it ran up the side of the mountain. There's no way a bear might walk on its hind legs, but a bear cannot run on its hind legs, and he said he saw it, It scared him to death. He ran in the house and didn't tell anybody for quite a while. I think if one thing that, in my opinion, again, I give my opinion a lot, but, that's what it is. It's my opinion. One thing that BFRO does well is document sightings. Now, whether they're legitimate sightings or not, they document them. But White County, Cleveland, Georgia area, year after year after year after year has more sightings than any other place in Georgia. I don't know why that is. There's a lot of national forest in that county. There's more national forest in other counties. But for some reason, I don't know whether it's because, Helen being there, being the tourist attraction that it is, and, bringing more people to that area. But again, that's their sightings. Both of them gave me permission to give those, and that's what happened.
Well, awesome, man. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your own experiences and sharing their experiences and listening to me go on my rant for about 30 minutes.
Well, I appreciate it, Brian, and I love what you're doing here, and I hope you continue.
Absolutely, man. It was my pleasure. I appreciate it much.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And that's it for tonight's show, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you guys next week.